The Chiefs' offense has been a disappointment this season, at least compared to how we are used to them performing since Mahomes became the starter in 2018, and in this video, I want to take an in-depth look at the player that I think has been the biggest disappointment on that side of the ball, because not only has he greatly underperformed this season, but he's also one of the highest paid players on the entire team. So we got to talk about that, but not before we preview this Chiefs and Raiders Christmas matchup and take a look at the injury report, because the long list of injuries basically looks exactly how you'd expect it this late into the season. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? First up, I want to thank Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video, but more on them later because we got to get immediately into this Week 16 Chiefs and Raiders matchup that's happening on Christmas Day, 12 p.m. Central at Arrowhead Stadium. The Raiders are coming off a crazy 63-21 victory over the Chargers that actually got the Bolts head coach, Brandon Staley, and their GM fired. So now the only two teams in the NFL to have fired both their head coach and GMs this season are the Chargers, as well as the Raiders, who just beat them. The Raiders are a up and down team even recently. They put up 63 points last week, yes, but the week before they put up a literal goose egg in a very, very thrilling 3-0 game against the Vikings. And considering that a high-scoring game is basically impossible to recreate, I don't see this happening again on Christmas. See the Dolphins, for example, who put up 70 on the Broncos earlier this season. Then the very next game, they lost to the Bills 20-48. So it truly is a week-to-week league, and it's one that I have Kansas City winning 30-17. Merry freaking Christmas. And with that win, they will lock up the AFC West for the 8th season in a row. However, you cannot overlook a divisional opponent like the Raiders, a team you are playing for the second time in roughly a month, and KC will need to focus up and play a solid 4 quarters against this team, which is something they did not do during their last matchup. In fact, they quickly went down 14-0, which was way less than ideal, with running back Josh Jacobs housing a 63-yarder for Vegas' second score in the second quarter. And that is something the team wants to focus on this go-round, limiting the Raiders' run game as they ran for 123 yards back in November. Something that will help with that, though, is the fact that linebacker Nick Bolton is back again, as he was out on IR previously. Outside of that, they need to focus on Davante Adams, with defensive backs coach Dave Merritt noting Davante is a game changer, a game wrecker, and everyone has to be on high alert for him, treating him like Where's Waldo, always searching around for him. Someone else they need to keep an eye out for is wide receiver Jacoby Myers, who caught 6 passes for 79 yards and a touchdown the last time these two teams played. And even with Brian Cook out on IR, I believe Snead and company in the secondary will be able to have an effective game plan to limit the Las Vegas playmakers, and I don't anticipate them getting anywhere near 63 points. In fact, the Chiefs' defense is still the 3rd best in the league, allowing an average of just 17.5 points per game, and considering last matchup ended 31-17 and a Chiefs W, I'm gonna go with them scoring something very similar to that. The Raiders also struggle on third downs, converting only 35% of the time, and the Chiefs' defense is currently 9th best on third down. One thing I'd like to see the Chiefs defense do a bit better this go round, though, is to actually get home to Aiden O'Connell. He was only sacked once roughly a month ago against Kansas City, and I need them to get home at least 3 times, please and thank you, for a Christmas present, which normally isn't hard for a defense that is tied for the 3rd most sacks in the league. Then, if we flip to the other side of the ball, KC's offense just needs to play a clean game. Start fast, finish strong, pause. But please, for the love of God, limit the turnovers. They have more this season already than any full season prior in the Andy Reid era. They need to also get a few less penalties as well and score more in the red zone than they typically have this season, being just the 14th best red zone offense this year when they were previously number 2 last year. Isaiah Pacheco had himself a solid game last battle, racking up nearly 100 yards from scrimmage, and with him back and working this week after missing a couple of games due to a minor shoulder cleanup surgery, Andy Reid said he should be more than good to go in this game. If not, they have a dependable guy in CEH who just went for around 100 scrimmage yards himself last week. However, WR McKinnon is still nursing a groin injury, and he did not practice yesterday or today. He did play last week, but he's trending towards not playing this week, so CEH may be seeing himself a fair share of snaps either way. Rashee Rice will probably be getting looked at a bit more seriously this time, as he previously went off for 107 yards and a touchdown on 8 catches, with Kelsey catching 6 of his own for 91 yards. And that's why something we'll need to keep eyes on is the wide receiver room in general. Like, who's going to step up? Because it's going to look a bit different this week the way things are trending anyway. And I guess since I spoke on McKinnon's injury, it's worth taking a look at the injury report because there's a couple wide receivers on there as well. First off, Sky Moore was placed on IR earlier this week. He's not on the injury report, but it's just worth noting. And Andy Reid said there's a chance he can return from IR in the postseason if Kansas City makes it that far, saying this about Sky's knee: "The thing's tender, he's a tough kid and tried to battle through it. But obviously with him going on IR, he needed to rest it for a while." And speaking of players on IR, Andy Reid also mentioned that wide receiver Mecole Hardman's 21-day window to return from IR opened up this week. He's been out there at practice getting some limited work in, and Big Red said, "We'll just see how he does." So I honestly have no idea if he will return for this Christmas game or not just yet. But it's also worth noting that wide receiver Kadarius Toney is another receiver who may also not be playing in this Raiders game, as he didn't practice at all today or yesterday, with his hip being listed this time on the injury report. The man almost lives on it. So that means we will more than likely see an increase in snaps from the veteran Richie James, or Rick James, as I like to call him, especially considering once again that Sky is also out of the picture on IR. I think because of that, Richie sees a pretty big uptick in snaps personally, but we also can't forget that wide receiver Justin Ross is also back from suspension. I'm not laughing that he's back, it's just there's so much change in the wide receiver room going on right now, it's pretty crazy. So Justin Ross could also play in this game, though I would expect his total snaps to be pretty low, with him out there in limited looks considering he couldn't practice with the team for the entire 6-week period he was suspended. And as far as other players on this injury report, Nick Bolton and Cam Jones have been sick this week, but Bolton returned today and was a full participant. Meanwhile, Cam Jones has missed the last 2 days. Then aside from McKinnon, Toney, and Mecole, who I've already discussed, left tackle Donovan Smith was a limited participant Thursday. I'm sure they tried to see how he would do in limited fashion, but the fact that he didn't practice today at all means it's more than likely rookie Wanya Morris up again to protect Mahomes' blind side come Christmas. Patrick Mahomes himself said today that Wanya is a battler who's going to go out and fight every week. He's going to finish every play, and even if he loses a rep, he will not let that affect his mentality. He's only getting better and is ready to go whenever his number is called. Well, Wanya, looks like your number is going to be called again on Christmas, so let's freaking go. The rest of the guys on the injury report, including some names to watch like Travis Kelce, neck, Rashee Rice, hamstring, and Trey Smith, hip. Good God, please don't get any worse. We're all full participants both Thursday and Friday, so they're all trending towards playing, which is good, with the last guy on this list being CEH, who did not practice today, but it was an excused absence, and he's fine as far as his health is concerned. For the Raiders, here's what theirs looks like. You can see every player on there. I'm not going to go through it all, but I do want to talk about a couple of big guys on there like Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs, a couple of dogs. Crosby has been playing through that knee injury like every week, so I would expect him to go again this week. And Josh Jacobs is back in limited capacity after not playing last week, so time will tell there if Jacobs is indeed good enough to go this coming Monday. Next up, with the football season in full swing, I am extremely focused on creating engaging and quality content for you guys, and find myself with less time to do things such as look over our budget that includes our bank accounts and credit cards in a timely and organized manner. And that's why the sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money, has helped me stay on top of that and more. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that has over 5 million members and growing, that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, manage your money better, and even help build a custom budget all in one app. I just talked with Danny, my wife, this week about saving up for a new car, and Rocket Money allows me to analyze our spending habits to help create a custom budget that works with our lifestyle and even notifies us when we've exceeded our limits. So this will help us save for a new vehicle, and one way it's already helped with that is by showing me I was getting double charged by one company, and also revealed a couple video game subscriptions I completely forgot about that I was paying for month after month. One unique thing about them is that they actually help cancel unwanted subscriptions for you with just a cap. Seriously, they will literally do the legwork of canceling the subscriptions, which is perfect for me because instead of chasing these companies down and spending time canceling things, Rocket Money can do it for me, which frees me up to make even more content for you. Another interesting thing they can do is help negotiate and lower your bills, two of which off the bat I saw from the app was AT&T, my wife's cell phone carrier, and Vivint, the company we just used to set up security cameras around our house. And to try it out for yourself today and unlock more features with premium, head to rocketmoney.com/thosechiefs or click the link in the description down below.
Rocket Money is the best.
From here, I got to talk about something that has actually kept me up at night and has caused dozens of hours of lost sleep. Okay, maybe it's not that bad, but that is, of all the biggest problems offensively on the team, I would put Jawan Taylor up near the top, yeah, but I think there's somebody that tops even Jawan Taylor, in my opinion, even with all of his penalties and everything we've been dealing with him. And to find this person I'm talking about, you'll need to look to the wide receiver room. And while it's no surprise that room as a whole has been the biggest letdown of any position group for KC this season, there's one player in that room that has disappointed me the most. And before I get there, we all know the main stats of the room as a whole. They have the most drops in the NFL, the worst drop rate over the last decade, are bottom 5 in their ability to create separation on routes ran of any other team, etc., etc. We know. But the player that has disappointed me the most in that room is not Kadarius Toney. It's not Sky Moore, though they have both been disappointing in their own ways, don't get me wrong. It's actually the veteran of the room, the guy who has the 4th highest base salary on the team this year, only behind Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, and Justin Reed, and the guy who has the 6th biggest cap hit on the team behind only the 3 I just mentioned, as well as Patrick Mahomes and Joe Toney, and that is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Many of us, myself included, expected to at least have the same level of overall production from him this year compared to last, especially considering he was going into year 2 of Andy Reid's offense and was the veteran of the room, the leader by far. And it wasn't that far-fetched considering he took a decent leap in 2022 compared to 2021. In 2021 with the Packers, he had 26 receptions for 430 yards and 3 touchdowns. But in 2022, he caught almost double the passes, close-ish, 42 for 687 yards, which was roughly 250 more yards than his 2021 season. And he also snagged a couple of TDs. Then, of course, MVS nearly single-handedly helped win the AFC Championship game against the Bengals last year, and for that game alone, I will forever be grateful, so don't get that twisted, but past accomplishments aren't enough to let anyone off the hook for current struggles, in my opinion. I mean, for example, if my daughter got straight A's last year, but this year was failing a few classes, I'm not going to look at her and say, oh, that's okay, sweet girl. I remember last year you had straight A's, so I forgive you for failing first grade this year, no problem. No. That is not how life works. If my daughter doesn't get a pass, neither does a professional athlete in the NFL making millions and millions of dollars. So again, most of us expected at least the same level of output from MVS, maybe even more from him in year 2 with KC, but boy, oh boy, were we wrong. MVS is currently trending towards having his worst ever season of his entire 6-year NFL career in basically every single category. Don't believe me? Look at this. He's currently on pace to finish the season with roughly 24 catches for 379 yards and 1 touchdown. That's worse than any year of his career and is nearly half the overall output from last season. And while I sadly can't give you the exact reason as to why this is happening, I think one main reason is simply due to the fact that MVS has lost a step this year. He's only 29 years old, but man, he is just not the same, with one of the biggest issues being the fact that he hasn't been on the same page with Mahomes on several deep balls. You can see the confusion between the two almost every single game, and it's become such an issue that MVS's offensive snaps have gone down drastically the second half of the season. The first 7 weeks, for example, MVS averaged 43.6 snaps per game, but the last 4 weeks alone, he's averaged only 27.3 snaps per game and has only seen 22 snaps the last 2 games in a row, 44 total, which is basically half his average snaps from the first half of the season. Then if you look at his production over the last 5 games, he's caught only 6 passes for 63 yards, which is an average of 12.6 yards per game, and he has 0 touchdowns. That is definitely a downward trend. And the reason for his decrease in overall snaps is pretty obvious to me. He's underperforming. He's supposed to be the team's deep threat, right? Well, this year he's been targeted on 13 passes over 20 yards and has only caught 3 of those. That's a 23.1 reception percentage. Then he's just 1 for 3 on contested catches downfield on passes over 20 yards. Last year though, MVS was targeted 26 times downfield and caught literally 50% of those. That's right, he caught 13 of those deep passes, being 4 for 9 on contested deep balls. So his deep ball production has literally dropped from catching half of those, 50%, to just 23.1%. And that 23.1% is so bad that it has him tied for the 15th worst receiver out of 86 qualifying receivers in the entire NFL who has been targeted at least 20% of 38 passes over 20 yards. On top of that, MVS also has the most receiving routes ran of any wideout on the team, but is 5th in receptions, 5th in receiving percentage, and 3rd in yards. And he also has the worst receiving grade on PFF of anyone in the wide receiver room aside only from Justin Ross. And I think part of why this bothers me so bad is because of how much this man is getting paid. MVS is literally making more money this year than all the other Chiefs wide receivers combined. In fact, you can add the cap hit of every receiver on the active roster, subtract that from MVS's $11 million cap hit, and still have roughly $2 million left over, and that's including the cap hit of Sky Moore and Mecole Hardman, who are both still on IR. And if you look at this league-wide, according to overall cap hits for wide receivers at least, MVS is up there near players like Terry McLaurin, Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and Deebo Samuel. And some will say, Cole, it's way more fair to compare average annual salary rather than overall cap hits. So, okay, here you go. Look at these players. Almost every single player on any list you look at is outperforming him at his price range. And if that doesn't make you feel sick enough, I'll leave you with this. If you take MVS's $11 million cap hit and average that out per catch he's made this season, 20 catches so far, he's currently averaging $550,000 per catch. And you know what? I'm not sure I would have even made a video on this subject if MVS was a man who simply took accountability of the fact that he's really struggling this year. But no, he actually would rather pretend like nothing is wrong.
With everything going on with you this season, just how have you been focusing mentally on getting better every week?
What do you mean everything going on?
Drops here and there, and then, things happen late in games.
I don't really know what you're referring to. It's not really anything that's going on that doesn't happen in any other season, that doesn't happen in any other player in this league.
And after this video went insane on social media for obvious reasons, MVS actually then responded to PJ Green, the reporter who posted this video, saying he was disappointed in PJ for his lack of understanding and research he put into the questions that were asked, and so his demeanor was directed toward PJ. Well, I went ahead and did the research, just gave it to all of you watching so you have the understanding, which sadly does not make me feel any better. Even worse probably, due to the fact that MVS is the veteran in the room and took zero accountability there. All of this that I've shared with you guys is why I think the Chiefs need to move on from MVS next year and why they most likely will. They can let him go and save around $9.5 million. He carries just a $2 million dead cap, which is a decent chunk of change they can save and help bring in at least one more solid veteran into the wide receiver room that could desperately use the help. But that's where I want to pass the question off to you guys. Do you also think MVS has been the most disappointing player on the entire roster this season, or would you give that title to someone else? And if you give that to somebody else, who is it and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?